Awesome.
All right, thank you so much, Tanae. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Um, the typical, am I on mute? Can you hear me? All the pomp and circumstance that Zoom makes us do these days. You can see my screen? Yeah? Awesome, great. All right, well, just so a little bit, I love to see smiling faces. So if you are interested in turning your camera on, I would love that. Like I said, I like to see smiling faces or not smiling faces, whatever floats your boat. And I'm going to be asking you to put some comments or some emojis as we go through talking today. So be ready to put some comments in the chat. Get your chat ready to go. And thank you so much for having me, Ladies at UX, Seattle. And I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to talk about Aesop's Fables and UX and some stories about a UX pro. So I have a lot to cover. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. But before I get too far in today's talk, let me introduce myself very quickly. My name is Jen Blatz, and I'm a lead user experience researcher at BECU. So I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with that, those in the Seattle area. If you are familiar with BECU, which is a credit union in the Seattle area, give me a thumbs up or throw a yes in the chat. Let me know if you've ever heard of it. And I am a researcher there. And I'm also one of the co-founders of an international meetup group called UX Research and Strategy. We're all online. And we have monthly events. We actually have an event next week, a networking event. So if you'd like to network with more people next week, I know we have some networking tonight, but if you'd like to network with some more people next week, you can find UX Research and Strategy on LinkedIn, all your favorite social media channels. Another little plug I want to give for that group is next month in April, we're going to have Don Norman come speak with us. So that's pretty cool. He's got a new book coming out, and he's going to be talking about how to design for a better world. So if you're interested in that, Chanae, I think I sent you a link if you want to throw that in the chat to share so that people could get tickets if they are interested. All right, enough about me. Let's go ahead and jump right in. So is anyone here familiar with the TV show Ted Lasso? If you're familiar with it, ever seen it, heard of it, thumbs up or some kind of emoji or throw a yes in the chat. And for those who I see some people are familiar with it, but for those who are not, let me tell you a little bit about what the show is about. So Ted Lasso is an American football coach, and he's hired to coach English soccer, a Premier League soccer team over in England. And he knows absolutely nothing about soccer. But what he does is he brings this naive yet sweet kind of vibe to the team. And Lasso comes off as really clueless, which is magnified by his Southern American accent. But as you realize as the show goes on, he may not know a lot about soccer, but he teaches his team a lot about life. And in one episode, Ted is confronted in a pub by one of the show's nemesis characters. His name is Rupert. He's the one here on the left with the gray hair. And Rupert challenges Lasso to a game of darts because Rupert assumes Ted Lasso knows nothing about darts. He thinks he's going to win. And Ted leads the crowd to think that he doesn't know how to play darts, saying things like, oh, this is going to be a hoot in his goofy American accent. Well, as the game continues, it's revealed that Ted actually is a masterful dart player, and he suavely kicks Rupert's butt. And so what's the moral of the story? We should find out as much as possible about someone before coming into conflict with them. And now the topic today I'm going to talk about is fables and how that relates to the UX world. And the example I just shared, it's not really exactly an Aesop fable. And I'm going to go into a little bit more about what a fable actually is. But that Ted Lasso scenario has some elements that make up a great story. The storyline is intriguing. Perhaps you found some aspects of the story relatable. And finally, the story is memorable. So I know the summary I gave of that episode doesn't give the show justice. I suggest you check it out because there's going to be a new season of Ted Lasso coming out pretty soon. So catch up on the old ones before the new one comes out. It's such a great show. Even if you're not a soccer fan like me, check it out. So let me run through what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to explain what Aesop fables are. I'm going to tell you who this Aesop fella is. I'm going to share a bunch of examples of stories and the morals with those stories. And I'm going to show you how these classic fables can be applied to our modern UX and professional world. So I hope you're ready for a fun ride through a bunch of interesting stories. First, did you know that some idioms and phrases that people use today actually came from Aesop's fables? True story. Phrases like, united we stand, divided we fall. Don't count your chickens before they hatch. Honesty is the best policy. If you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. All of these come from morals from Aesop's fables. Are you familiar with any of these phrases? Anybody thumbs up or heart? Has anybody heard of any of these? Yeah, I had no idea these were from Aesop when I was looking into it. Like, oh, interesting. And I think part of that is because Aesop fables have been around for a really long time. Well, how long? Let's get into that. So, who is this Aesop guy, anyways? Well, yes, Aesop is a real human being, and it's believed that Aesop was a slave and a storyteller who lived in ancient Greece between 620 and 562 BCE. And this image here is thought to be a statue depicting the man in the legend of Aesop or Aesop. I don't know. I'm going to say Aesop. Okay, so now let's talk about what is a fable. So you're going to get a little mini etymology lesson here. The word fable comes from the Latin word fabula, which is a story. And fables are stories that have been shared orally for centuries. Initially, fables were addressed to adults, and they covered religious, social, and political themes to get people to think about moral dilemmas and how to learn life lessons. And then starting about the Renaissance time, those stories were used more so to educate children through teach them morals through these memorable stories. So fables traditionally have 4 central characteristics. The first one is symbolism. The characters in fables, they act as like substitutes or symbolically they represent human beings. Their actions are usually negative, they're usually messing up, and it's meant to symbolize human behavior. 2 is anthropomorphization. Okay, that's a big word, so I'm going to say it again. Anthropomorphization. Wow, I can't believe I actually said it right. That's a big one. And so what that means is most fables, not all of them, but it means you give animals or non-human objects characteristics of humans. So these animals are given human qualities, basically. The third thing of fable is a lesson. Every fable has a moral lesson that comes from the story. So for example, the moral slow and steady wins the race. That comes from the fable, The Tortoise and the Hare. Anybody ever heard of The Tortoise and the Hare? I'm going to share that story with you. So the story is a hare, or that's another name for a rabbit. He brags about how much faster he is than the tortoise. So the hare challenges the tortoise to a race. The hare darts off, he gets a huge lead, and then what? He gets cocky. He's like, you know what? I've got such a huge lead in this race, I'm going to take a nap. So the hare takes a nap, and then slowly and surely, the tortoise catches up and gets to the finish line. And by the time the hare realizes the tortoise is at the finish line, he wakes up and he's like, oh crap, the tortoise crosses the finish line and wins the race. So what's the moral of that story? Well, don't let your arrogance get in the way of reality. In this case, the hare got cocky, he let his arrogance get in the way, and he lost the race. And finally, the fourth element of a fable is humor. They're often lighthearted and they are often showing the foolishness of human beings. Okay, so back to that Ted Lasso story for a minute. It was intriguing, it was relatable, and it was memorable, right? I would also say there's a moral to that episode. And the characters that are playing that part in the show are there to illustrate that moral lesson. And it's these lessons that come from Aesop's fables that I want to tie to our UX and professional world today. So let's go into some stories. The first couple of fables I want to share are about your career. Specifically, maybe some here on the call today are considering a new job, maybe at another company. So I want to start with the ass and his master. And an ass, which is an old school name for donkey, it's not a jerk in this case. An ass, he has an owner who gives him very little food, and he had to work a whole lot. So he created a petition to be released from his present owner to go to a new owner. Okay, so that petition was granted, and he sold to a new owner, a tile maker. Well, now the ass has to carry heavier loads like bricks and ceramic tile. That's not so great. So he asks for another owner. And the ass gets a third owner which is a tanner, and that's someone who makes leather from animal skins. Ooh, yikes. The ass realizes he's even worse off than with the tanner, and he groans, "Ugh, it would have been better for me to either have starved by the first owner or to be overworked by the tile maker than to have been bought by my present owner. And this owner is going to even appreciate me when I'm dead and tan my hide to make me useful for him." So what's the moral of the ass and his master? Well, he that finds discontent in one place is not likely to find happiness in another. And you're probably familiar with this saying with like the grass is not greener on the other side, or the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know. Anybody heard of these? Maybe a thumbs up or yes to the chat if you've ever heard these phrases. Yeah. So what the idea speaks to is that sometimes changing jobs is maybe not the best option. Sometimes finding the value in where you are with those user experience projects that you're working on might just be the right place for you. And so that leads me to a similar Aesop fable called The Astronomer. And yeah, I know I said that most of these fables are about animals, but not all of them are. And so there's going to be some similarities to the ass and his master in this fable. So one night there's this astronomer and he went outside to check out the stars. And so he's looking up in the sky and all of his attention's like looking up, and he's not paying attention, and he trips and he falls into a very deep well. Whoops. So from the bottom of the well, he starts yelling, "Help me, come get me," and a neighbor finally hears him and comes up to him. And so when the neighbor learns what's happened, the neighbor said, "Why, in trying to see the heavens, do you not manage to see what's at your feet?" So the moral of that story: we should never look so high as to miss seeing the things that are right around us. And this can apply to a job that we might currently be in and thinking, the grass might be greener on the other side, right? So maybe you're a user experience designer working on enterprise software, and you don't think it's that sexy. You don't think it's very exciting. So you're itching to find something more fun, like maybe you want to go work for a company that creates trendy mobile apps. But step back for a second. Think about how much good that you could do for the users of that enterprise software. You might just be in the right place after all. Okay, I want to switch gears and talk a little bit about relationship in the workplace. Sometimes building relationships can be tough. It takes effort to reach out to other people, to get to know them, and to make genuine connections. But forming these relationships with product managers and developers and marketing and even other people, that can often be the key to your success in a company. So let's explore some fables that dive into the positive aspects of forming professional relationships. So I want to tell you the story of the lion and the three bulls. So a lion used to prowl around in the field, which these three bulls used to hang out. And the lion tried to attack the bulls many times. But whenever the lion came up to the bulls, they all got together and they stuck their horns out. And they're like, "Rrr," and scared the lion off because they're big and have big horns. Well, one day the bulls got into a fight and they each huffed off into different parts of the pasture by themselves. And the lion noticed this, and he noticed that they were apart, and he attacked them one by one and finished them all off. So the moral of the lion and the three bulls: in union, there is strength. In other words, if UX designers stick together, they can keep the lion product owner from coming in and wrecking everything. No, I'm just joking. Joke. What it really means is that if you build relationships and form an alliance toward a common goal, you can really get things done. So in the user experience world, I think this speaks to the value of connecting with our developers or our product owners or product managers so that we can better understand each other. Uncover the challenges and the pain points that they have too. You know, the classic skill that UX people are supposed to have: empathy. And use that understanding of the people around you that we work with to move forward together towards success. Then you can build great stuff together as a team. In union, there is strength. So, next one, I want to talk about that fox and the lion. Sounds like a name of a pub where you get a great pint, doesn't it? Maybe I'm thirsty. I don't know. On to the fable. A very young fox who had never seen a lion before happened to meet one in the forest. One look at the lion was enough to scare off the lion, scare off the fox to send him to his hiding place. So then the fox was coming across the lion again when they were walking around the forest. The second time the fox saw the lion, he stopped, looked behind the tree a little bit, but still got pretty scared and went away and hid. But the third time the fox saw the lion, he was feeling a little bit more familiar with the lion, and he actually approached him. The fox boldly went up to the lion and said, "Hello, old friend." So I think that many of us can relate to the moral of this fable: acquaintance softens prejudices. How many times have we had assumptions, maybe even negative ones, about a stakeholder or about another person on our team? Maybe we were not sure about them. Maybe we didn't agree with them on some point. Or, sometimes we just don't start off on the good foot. I've been there. Anybody else been there where you're like, I'm not really a big fan of that person? But then maybe you had a more casual interaction with them. Maybe you had drinks after work, or you talked to them more intimately about a project, and we thought, this person, they're not that bad. And that's what this fable is about. If we get to know someone a bit, our prejudices or our assumptions against them can start to go away. All right, so I talked about fables and how they relate to relationships in the workplace. Now let's talk about user experience work itself. Whether you're a UX designer, a content editor, or a content person, a designer, a researcher, I think that there are some morals from Aesop fables that you could apply to your UX work as well. So let's start off with a story about the ass and the lion's skin. Again, an ass, the donkey, not a jerk. He found some lion skin that some hunters had left out in the sun to dry. So the ass put on some lion skin and went toward the local village. Everyone was terrified at the sight of a lion and ran off when he approached. Man, the ass was so impressed with himself, he gave up his cover though, as soon as he bragged about how he scared everyone in the village. The fox came up to the ass and said, "Ah, I knew you by your voice. If you had kept your mouth shut, you might have frightened me too. But you gave yourself away with that silly ass voice of yours." So the moral of the ass and the lion's skin is fine clothes may disguise, but silly words will disclose a fool. So how does this relate to UX design? Well, to me, I have an interesting interpretation. So hear me out. So I think it applies when a company insists that we reskin an interface without making any usability or functionality improvements. I know some of us have been there. Anybody been there yet? Where they're like, oh, just put the new fonts on it, put the new colors, but we're not going to change the way it works. Yeah, just apply the new design system. Make it look more modern. I've heard this. Ooh, yeah. Yes, Heather, make it pop. Ooh, don't get me started. So we know as UX professionals that there are times when more needs to be done than just making it look pretty. And you know what? Our customers know it too. So this is why I encourage all of the UX folks here to not fall for the moral of the ass and the lion skin, which is fine clothes may disguise, but silly words will disclose a fool. Just applying contemporary design to some old website or app may not be the best fix. Our silly words, like the fable said, might not be literal words. Those silly words may actually be lack of improvement. So, we want to do right by our users when we upgrade an experience by not just applying a pretty new skin. We want to improve the usability as well. Okay, next fable is called The Frogs in the Well. And I think that this relates to user experience research. Two frogs live together in a marsh. And one hot summer, the marsh dried all up. So they had to go leave to find another moist place to live. I guess frogs like moist places. I don't know. I'm not a frog. So after searching around a lot, they came to a deep well. And one of the frogs looked down into it and said, hey, let's hop in here. The other frog, who was a bit wiser, said, not so fast, bud. What if this well dries up like the marsh? Since it's so deep, how would we get out again? So this fable has a moral I think you might have heard of. Look before you leap. Anybody heard of that? Look before you leap. That's kind of an old-fashioned, been around for a long time. In other words, you should not do something without a regard to the consequences. And I think that this is especially applicable to user experience research. And that is part of the reason why we conduct research, right? We conduct research to make data-informed decisions. We do generative research to make sure we're learning about our users' needs, their goals, and their pain points. And hopefully we have the opportunity to do this foundational research so that we know we're solving the right problems. And so we know that how to build the right solutions. But we can also perform concept tests and usability tests so that we can validate that our designs are meeting our users' needs and expectations. And this is why I think the moral of the story, look before you leap, really applies to user experience research. Okay, now let's jump to a larger beast in the animal kingdom and talk about the Aesop fable, the lioness. So there were a few animals that were arguing about which animals produce the greatest number of babies at birth. When the lioness, or the lion's baby mama, said, well, she only makes one, all the other animals laughed at her. Well, the lioness laughed back and said, yeah, I may only make one, but that baby is a lion, which is the king of the animal kingdom. So this is another famous saying that you might be familiar with and maybe didn't know that this was from an Aesop fable. I sure didn't know the origin of this phrase. The moral of the lioness story, quality, not quantity. So this reminds me of another phrase that's common in the UX world, the paradox of choice. When a person is presented with too many choices, they struggle to choose one. This is the same ideas of Hicks law. Anybody here have heard of the term Hicks law? That says the more choices that you present to users, the longer it's going to take for them to reach a decision. And so when we are designing an experience, it's really vital that we present the best options to our users rather than every option, even if they say they want every option. They don't want them, trust me. We have the power to be like the lioness, the queen of the animal kingdom, and cater our users' experience to a few key options rather than everything under the sun. Quality, not quantity. Okay, I want to talk about this fable called The Boy and the Filberts. Now, there's some debate as to whether or not this fable is really from Aesop. But I like the story and the moral so much, I'm going to claim that it is, and I'm going to go with it. So for those who didn't know, I did not know, a filbert is another name for a hazelnut. Oh, never heard of a filbert before this. So that's what it is. So the boy and the filbert. So a boy puts his hand into a pitcher of filberts, and he grabbed as many as he could. But when he tried to pull out his hand, he couldn't do so because the neck of the pitcher was too narrow and he had too many filberts in his hand. So he busted out in tears and started crying. And a bystander said to him, "Hey, be satisfied with half the quantity, drop some of the filberts, and you'll be able to take your hand out." Duh. So what's the moral? Do not attempt too much at once. And this concept relates to UX in so many ways. Like the Lioness fable, don't force too many options on the user. Provide information to the user in small, consumable chunks. Understand the critical use cases and user flows and start designing there. Create that optimal experience by understanding the key steps a person would take to complete a task. And also, this relates to Agile, right? This is why those who practice Agile software development break their work into smaller stories or tasks so that it can be completed in a sprint rather than waiting months or maybe even years to release one iteration. Now, there are so many examples I could go through that this concept applies to UX, but I think you get the point and the moral of the story. Don't try too much at once. So I want to wrap up today's talk with one more Aesop fable that's less about our professional development or UX design and more about our personal existence. So let's talk about the lion and the mouse. Wow, just realized I have a lot of stories about lions today for some reason, don't I? Okay, we're going with it. So the lion and the mouse. One day, a lion catches a mouse and the mouse begs to be let go. He promises to repay the lion in exchange for his life. This sounds pretty good. So the lion agrees to let the mouse go. A few days later, the mouse finds that same lion who's now trapped in a hunter's net. The tiny mouse remembers the lion's mercy. He chews through the rope until the lion is set free. So the moral of the lion and the mouse is every act of kindness, no matter how small, is never wasted. And I'm a firm believer that everything happens for a reason. So when it comes to good fortune, sometimes there might be a way for you to pay it forward. Maybe you help your teammates out when they feel overwhelmed. Maybe you consider the perspective of any person, no matter what their title or education level is. You stand up for the user when you get a request for a product or design that seems to promote opposite of what the user's agenda is. Basically, just be a good person. Remember that every act of kindness, no matter how small, is never wasted. So here's a wrap of all the fables and the morals that we went through today. I'm not going to read them all out, But if you want to take a screenshot to help you remember them, this is a good one to take a shot of. I'll leave it on here for a second. And I hope you had as much fun as I did learning about some classic fables and origins of famous phrases, which was the coolest thing for me. And I hope you enjoyed my application to these classic morals to our professional UX world. But before I close today, I want to revisit one more story. Now, again, I know the Ted Lasso episode is not an Aesop fable, but I still think the moral of the story is worth revisiting. The message from the Ted Lasso show is we should find out as much as possible about someone before coming into conflict with them. And this message can definitely be applied to our professional world as well. Have empathy for our teammates and our stakeholders and our partners before assuming the worst case scenario. And when it comes to the user experience world, understand our users and customers so that we can build better products for them. Again, we should find out as much as possible about someone before coming into conflict with them. So thank you so much for traveling through these stories with me. The end. Feel free to connect to me with me on LinkedIn, and maybe tell me your favorite Aesop fable or moral that we learned about today, or at another time. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Jen. This was wonderful, and I didn't realize how many morals, but also sayings and takeaways was rooted in these fables. That's really awesome, and how that is tied back into research. So I know that we have time for a breakout session, and then a mini mixer. I will stop the recording now, though, so we can. Give me 1 second. Oh, here we go.